Hi, I'm Gwen Nagel. I live in Grantham and in Maine in the summer. And I grew up in Minnesota in the flatlands, so I wasn't particularly interested in the landscape, but I became so. I went to a small school and I didn't have art classes, but I had a fifth grade art teacher who really encouraged me. I went off to college thinking I would be an art major, but I ended up being an English professor. But my summers in Maine, once we were living in Boston, I started taking watercolor workshops, and I worked in watercolor for a few years. I met a woman who is a pastel painter. She taught me pastels. I got hooked on those. And then my husband and I moved to Georgia, where there was a very large plein air movement. A lot of people were painting on location. And I joined it, and I was one of the founding members of a group called the Plein Air Painters of the Southeast. And I painted all over the Southeast with a lot of painters. And when we moved back to New England, I live in Maine in the summer, but I go south to New Hampshire for the winter. I still continue to paint outside. And what I've got up at the Blue Loon today is a collection of both pastels and oils. Many times I'll work out on location in one medium, bring it back to my studio and do a larger piece in another medium. This is a pastel, not a landscape, it's a painting of spring onions. Most of the paintings that I have in here are landscapes, but that's another one. This is a painting of a rooster. Sorry for the glare, but that's the issue with pastels sometimes. I wish I remember the name of that particular rooster, but I don't. I live in Eastman, and this is a recent painting I did. Whoops, I'm trying to find of Eastman Lake in the spring. I love all seasons, but the spring colors are so lovely. I like to capture them. It's Eastman Lake. This is another lake in Maine. It's Highland Lake, although it could be any number of a lake. I'm going to try to catch that without glare. Sorry about that. Misty Islands in Highland Lake. This is also a pastel. This I don't have such problems with the glare. This is an oil, a recent oil I did of a winter marsh. It's somewhere in where I live in New Hampshire. I can't quite remember where. This is a series of small paintings I've done. They're all pastel. This is of the Fells, the old garden of the Fells. This is over in Maine. It's a landmark tree that I have painted several times. I'm going to skip by that. This is in Newry, Maine. Lots of fall scenes and another fall scene. I try to get out as much as I can in all seasons. This little one is just a little 6x8. I was out last fall doing a plein air session, and I liked the color of the trees and so on, and I didn't have a lot of time, so I could only do a small one. What I do often with a plein air piece is I take it back to my studio and work larger. And this is a pastel that I did from the small oil painting that I did. I do that often. I'm never bored with my mediums, because if I'm working on one thing, I often try to do another painting of it in another medium. So I'll go back and forth between oil and pastel. This is another pastel. This is in actually a place called Ocean Point in Booth Bay. I painted here one day with several artists. There were about 75 of us. It was a Plein Air Painters of America paint out day. And I did a little oil, and from that study and many photographs, I did this pastel. The island, it's very hard to do, to capture surf, because it's constantly moving, so I do use photographs as well. The island in the distance is Monhegan, one of my favorite places. Coming into the Blue Loon, I hung one of my oils, a cow. I do like to do animals. I haven't done as many as I'd like, but this is a Vermont cow, big oil. I have several other pastels here. As I say, I like to paint on the islands in Maine, and I painted many hours one morning. I went over on an early boat. When the mist was there, I came back. That was a little oil I did. I came back, and in my studio I did these two pastels, which shows Monhegan. It was fall, and so the goldenrod was in bloom, and I love the way the colors and the mist was rising there. Again, issue with that. I love snow scenes. I grew up a Minnesotan, and we lived in the flat, but I love painting snow scenes. I'm not as brave as some of my compatriots who will paint outside in the snow. This is Fryeburg, Maine, the fields over there. And this is Eastman. I'm a cross-country skier, and this is one of the trails, and I happen to have my little camera along one day and just caught some trails. These are both pastels. This is one of those occasions. This is a Vermont farm. I was just driving down the road. I always have my camera with me. I didn't have the time. I had an appointment. I didn't have the time to stop. But I loved it that it was early in the spring. A gentleman was out working in his farm, getting the garden ready. This is also a pastel. I've painted many times on the Kankomagus, and this was a small scene I did one fall, the Kankomagus Highway that stretches across New Hampshire. This is a large pastel that I did in my studio of the Kank. There's a wonderful little pullout called Lily Pond, and every time I go by there I stop and photograph, and it fascinates me in all seasons. This should be familiar with the locals. It's the gazebo in New London. I caught it. I didn't paint there because it was the morning sun was just rising and the mist was rising, and so I did a little pastel from that. A little animal scene, a fawn. Pastels. And this is Mount Desert Island, an oil that I did. Again, fall scenes. This last group are 4 oils that I've done. I've worked a lot in pastel, and I'm trying to get going more in oils. And I like the horizontal shape of the landscapes, and I'll point these out all seasons. This is over on Cloudland Road in Woodstock, a favorite road of a lot of photographers. It's beautiful. This is in Enfield, a spring scene, an Enfield farm close to where I live. This is somewhere in Vermont. I'm not sure where, but it was a rainy day, and it certainly has the mood. I love trying to capture the various moods. Finally, this is Yankee Highland Farm. It's off exit 14 off of 89, and I live very close to this. I go by this many times a week. I caught this sort of at mud season, but the snow was still there. And those barns are lovely, and I've been here for 8 years now, and I see them crumbling, and it's very sad. And I think one of the things that I like to do in my painting is to capture something that's vulnerable, and I know that in a few years those barns won't be there. But I feel the same way, so I'm doing a kind of preservation of a scene that I think cannot last forever. But that happens to me when I'm painting anywhere on the landscape. I'll go by and see something that's lovely, and a couple years later the trees have grown up, or somebody has taken down trees and you can't see the scene anymore, or there's a big new building that blocks it. So whether I'm trying to capture the mood and the mist that's rising in Monhegan, or a part of the New England landscape that's vulnerable, that's one of the preserving functions I see that I'm doing. I enjoy being out just painting for the sheer joy of it, but preservation is also that I have in mind. Thank you.